Our first question from Kevin Robinson, please.
Will UKIP cause another earthquake in the general election next year?
Will UKIP cause another earthquake in the general election next year? Piers Morgan.
It's been very interesting watching the rise of UKIP from America, where I've been the whole time it's been going on, because looking from the outside, my initial reaction was, like most people, probably a bunch of crackpots, this isn't going to last. And then slowly but surely they gathered momentum, and I tried to work out why this was happening. And I think the answer is that the British people are basically fed up with mediocrity. They look at the leaders of these three parties and they see three very similar sounding, similar looking, white, middle class, middle-aged, quite posh gentlemen who seem to have no relation to the real world. You've got Mr. Boring, you've got Mr. Weird, you've got Mr. Useless. And along comes Nigel Farage, who, for all his faults, and he's got faults, he seems like a regular guy. He is a guy you can get on a pub to. He's a guy who puts a pint on his head. And you can kind of understand why a lot of people in this country, particularly working-class people, look at him and think, yeah, he's making sense. And he's been very clever, very smart as a politician. Two issues. Focus on two things, Europe and immigration. Two issues which I think most people have concerns about. And they're right to have concerns about them. And so I think that the rise of UKIP has been a very good thing for the democratic process in this country. I think it's shaken up Westminster, it's shaken up the main parties, but there comes a point where you've got to look at them and say, if they're a protest vote, I'm all in favour. But the moment you start to take them seriously as a party that can govern, I think you've got massive problems. Because I tried to find out what else UKIP stood for, other than get out of Europe and send all the foreigners home that we don't like. And I just did a little quick check on Google, and it was
not a
basically
great information source.
Well, end gay marriage, cut all taxes, ignore climate change, and bring back handguns. And I thought, are we serious? Is this a serious party? So the question is, can there be another UKIP earthquake in a real general election? A lot will depend on the three parties and how they respond to this threat. But UKIP, and I'll be interested to hear what the lady to my left has to say, has to wake up and take itself more seriously, and has to present now policies coming on the momentum they built up, which can actually resonate a lot more than just Europe and immigration.
And briefly, if it does that, can it cause another earthquake, or well, is it in with a chance?
Certainly, it's indisputable they've caused an earthquake, and I think it's a good thing. I think they've shaken things up. Can they do it again in the general election? I don't know. I mean, I think that... Do they really want to stand for more than Europe and immigration? Because I don't believe the next election will be fought on that. I think it'll be fought on the economy. Do they want to expand to that or not? I think it's an interesting situation we're in, and I congratulate Nigel Farage for coming this far, but I'm worried by what lies underneath UKIP and whether actually it sustains itself.
All right. We'll come to UKIP in a moment. Margaret Curran.
I think part of the rise of UKIP is explained by people's deep anger and resentment about what's going on in politics, but also partly what's going on in their lives. I think they saw the economic crisis. They saw, caused by bankers, but they see bankers' bonuses going. They tell you about they see the energy companies who keep saying that their prices have got to go up and our prices have got to go up, but their profits go on unchallenged. And I think people are deeply resentful of that and feel something has to be done. And, banking, following on from, MPs' expenses and such like, I think people have a deep complaint about the political system and feel politicians are not talking enough about their lives and the things that matter to them.
So it's your fault that UKIP rose?
I think that
you as Labour, them as Tories?
Well, partly it's the whole political class, but I do think Labour is genuinely trying to understand and talk about the issues that affect people in this country, such as energy prices, such as the cost of living. And Ed Miliband said at the very start of his leadership campaign that this has to be about changing the way that we do politics and breaking the closed circle of politics.
OK, well, it clearly hasn't happened yet, because it didn't happen in the European elections. The question is there going to be another UKIP earthquake in under a year from now when the general election comes?
Well, who knows? It depends, actually, if we actually...
Well, we're asking your view. You're a
well,
professional politician. You should know.
It depends to the scale that we respond to UKIP's, to the reasons why people voted UKIP.
Right.
I think UKIP are deeply wrong, and we need to expose why they're deeply wrong. We need to take on some of the arguments of UKIP, and I think that now needs to happen, and we need to be assertive and explain why UKIP are wrong. It is about understanding and addressing the fundamental issues in people's lives, and I think Labour does have a programme for that, and I am confident that we can answer people's needs. But we do need to make sure that we take on UKIP and expose some of the underbelly of some of the issues that they face.
What would be the one wrong thing you'd take on? You say we've got to expose where they're wrong. Where is it that they're... If you just took one thing that you could take to the election?
Well, I think this presentation that somehow all problems lie in immigration stroke Europe, and you can solve all problems just by those issues, is perhaps the thing that we need to take on. I think we need to live in a much more tolerant society. I think we need to look at what we've got in common with each other. I think that's how you address the deep malaise that is among people. You need to help people who work hard, give them a great return in life, but you don't do it by setting people apart against each other.
OK. We've got a lot of hands up, but I'd like to hear from Louise Bors, and then I'll bring in some members of the audience while we go on with the debate. Louise.
Thank you. Well, thank you to my two panellists for completely insulting and denigrating the 5.5 million people who did vote for UKIP last week. Yes, you did. You're patronising and sanctimonious.
Sorry?
The fact is...
Never been called that.
I'm sure it's only one of many things you've been called, Piers. Anyway, the fact is 5.5 million people did go out and vote for UKIP. Obviously, what the establishment cannot understand in any way is the disconnect that the normal people of this country feel with the establishment. There is a total disconnect. They look at Westminster, they look at the green leather, and they see nobody at all that represents them. Nobody who looks like them, nobody who talks like them, and so they've looked to something else. And that is why UKIP won last Thursday. The fact is, people want to see people they recognise. We want to see our representatives recognise. We want to recognise what they feel. We want to know that they're going through the kind of things that we go through on a regular basis. And that's what the political class is not doing in this country. And in fact, the political class and the establishment we are the symptom of how they have treated the people of this country. And the misinformation, like Piers has just given out, about the legalising handguns, banning gay marriage, utter nonsense. This is the misinformation.
Sorry, wait a minute.
Hang on. You've had your say.
Nigel Farage said he wanted to legalise handguns.
By the political establishment and the media in this country is incredible. What I say to you, ladies and gentlemen, you know, over the summer we will be putting together a domestic manifesto. This election has been fought on two things because it's a European election. So of course it's been fought on Europe. Of course it has. It's a European election.
Okay.
Over the summer we will have a full manifesto of domestic policies that all of you will be able to scrutinise, and so you should, and that is absolutely right.
Is it not true that Nigel Farage said he wanted to legalise handguns again in this country?
No, that's absolutely not true. What he was actually talking about was the fact that it was a disgrace that the Olympic gun team had to go outside of this country to train, and he said that was ludicrous. And I'm sorry, you're telling me that's not ludicrous?
No, that wasn't what he said.
Okay, let's leave...
what he said.
All right,
isn't what he said.
All right, let's leave guns for a moment. To go to the man up there, the top left there, with spectacles and blonde hair. Yes, you, sir.
In response to Pierce's first comment that all the party leaders are similar, is this not in response to our voting system? Because we've got to have someone who compromises between the 51% and the 49%, whilst party leaders such as Farage, they're a leader for about 30%. I mean, I personally would look at moving abroad if Nigel Farage was our leader next year.
And you over there.
Yeah. In my personal opinion, I think that UKIP support will fall in the general election when people start to focus on issues which affect them. So I live in Hammersmith, and there's just been a stunning victory there from Labour in the council election because they focus on the local NHS. And I think that when people read UKIP's last manifesto, where they wanted to privatise large parts of the NHS, as a doctor who works in the NHS, I think the British public are going to reject that.
They have,
I'm sorry, that again is misinformation. again, this is misinformation that's perpetuated by the establishment. We have never said we want to privatise the NHS. What we have said is we would like to streamline the NHS. There's 48% of people who work for the NHS who aren't clinically trained. Why aren't those resources targeted at doctors and nurses?
But we don't need
got
to talk
your
about...
manifesto in my pocket.
No, but the manifesto of 2010 is drivel, according to Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
I mean, he did actually say, I didn't read it, it was drivel, 486 pages of drivel.
This is honest.
Yeah, we needn't go into that. It's the new manifesto, I suppose, we should be concentrating on.
The thing that keeps getting me about it is that everyone's going around saying UKIP have done so well. But from what little I know about it, I don't think they've done that well. I mean, only 34% of the people voted.
Is not doing well.
Well, you've got no MPs.
Yeah, but we have...
So you can't have done that well.
But we just won a national election, Joey. We just won a national election.
Do you honestly think... Hang on, Louise.
Councillors.
Do you honestly think... I listened when you spoke. Do you honestly think that 34% of those eligible to vote cared enough about what they were voting for to make a drastic change? Because for me, they didn't.
The others didn't mobilise their vote. At least we did. We won the election.
Oh, you won the election. You won some seats in Europe, in the European Parliament, that nobody really cares about.
Well, they
because
should
nobody
care about
cared
it.
about voting for it.
Well, they should care about it.
Well, if you make the same traction, if you have the same traction in a general election, then I think people will sit up and take notice. I mean, obviously, the mainstream political parties are sitting up and take notice, but all you represent to me as UKIP is the best of a bad bunch. So if I'm somewhere and there was 4 really ugly girls, I'm thinking, well, she's not the worst, because that's all you are. That's all you are to us. That's all you are.
I have to say, the ignorance just espoused by this gentleman here, he basically fulfils the mission, doesn't he, that footballers' brains are in their feet. Well, because he's absolutely proved that to me tonight.
Well,
what an offensive thing to say, Mr. Barton.
OK, well, maybe they do. Maybe they do. But all I'm saying is,
frame your argument a little differently.
UKIP have not made the progress that everyone's professing for UKIP to make.
Winning a national election is not making the progress.
34% of those eligible to vote voted. Where were the other 6? So if everyone cared generally on a general election, because nobody cares, it was a protest vote. That's all it was.
All right.
Don't get too carried away with yourself.
I call it democracy, Mr.
No, all
Barton.
I call it is the Lib Dems are really bad at the minute, as everyone knows. I mean, I've got more chance of winning a general election than the Lib Dems, or Nick Clegg. And the other parties have failed to perform. So UKIP come in...
That's what democracy is.
I'll give you a bit of credit for that.
That's what democracy is.
OK, the man in the spectacles in the middle there.
Whilst I agree with the general premise of what Joey is saying, not the sexist comments, the actual figures are actually 9% of all eligible voters. So it's actually even less than what you're saying. So I think it even highlights the fact that they don't actually have that much support in those that actually went to vote.
You mean the 27% support of those who voted comes out at 9% of everybody who could have voted?
Yes, exactly.
Is that significant? David Willits.
It's 5 million people voting in a democracy. That is significant, yes. And that's messages for all of the political parties about the kind of anxieties people have. They have anxieties about Europe heading in the wrong direction. They have anxieties about migration. I actually think there's a deeper anxiety behind all that. I think they have an anxiety that our kids are not going to have the same kind of quality of life that we've enjoyed, and they expect politicians to do something to ensure that our kids do have better lives than the previous generation. So I think that's the challenge for us. I don't think UKIP are going to be able to rise to that challenge. And actually, the clue was in what Nigel Farage said on election day. He said a vote for UKIP was a free hit. He meant it was an opportunity to get a message to the government without any real consequences. Next year, people will be choosing a government. They'll be choosing who are the grown-ups who are going to do the long-term things that will ensure Britain keeps on growing, that our kids have a decent education, they have an opportunity to get on the housing ladder. And I think on those type of issues, it will be a completely different election than the one we've just had. And it's the one I look forward to when people are actually choosing the government of this country.
Why do you think UKIP can't... Why do you think UKIP can't deliver that, having clearly touched a nerve in the European election?
Because if you look at their... As I say, they're touching a chord. They're touching an anxiety that I understand. And I, as a Democrat, the fact 5 million people vote is very significant. When you actually look at what the policies are, then they are completely facile. It is not the case that this nation's problems are solved simply by leaving Europe. that it's actually a kind of diversion tactic. We have real challenges raising standards in our schools. We have real challenges of investing more in infrastructure. We have real challenges in ensuring that people get high-quality healthcare. Leaving Europe is not relevant for any of that. People, of course, want us to ensure Europe doesn't head in the wrong direction, and I actually think that this Prime Minister has been very effective in that. After all, we've already vetoed a treaty, we've delivered the first cut in the European budget. They want governments that do serious things, and what Nigel Farage was offering was a kind of escape from those real tasks that real governments have to get on with.
Why are you offering a referendum if it's an irrelevant issue?
No, I'm saying that there are so many other things like health or education on which essentially I doubt if any people who voted UKIP last Thursday knew what UKIP would do. And I'm not totally sure that even the UKIP MEPs exactly all agreed on what they were going to do on health or education.
Because it was a European election.
Sorry, can I just come up? Why are you offering a referendum? Why are you making such a big deal about the referendum if you don't think it's essential to solving people's problems?
Because Europe is heading in the wrong direction, and because too many powers are being taken in Brussels, and because part of the frustration is absolutely that Europe is doing things that are better decided by national governments.
Okay.
And so then the choice is who will effectively negotiate and who will then give you a choice in a referendum and the outcome of that negotiations. And there is only one party that can credibly offer that at the next election, and that's the Conservatives.
The person in the fourth row, I'll come to you in a moment, Jay. The man there, you.
Is it not very worrying that so many UKIP associates and MEPs and people who represent UKIP have come out as racist or making worrying comments or homophobic?
You name me one MEP also who's come out as being racist. Who's come out as being racist?
What was the gay weather fiasco that, you know...
Well, he's actually a Conservative councillor, actually, but when he was a Conservative councillor spouting that nonsense, nobody ever heard about it. But as soon as it came to UKIP...
A couple of days ago, someone associated with UKIP said that all Downs children, you know, we should have forced abortion, and how can you have horrific...
I've not heard... I've certainly not seen
papers.
that. Well, I've certainly not read that.
What about David Small, or Dave Small?
Is he the Worcester councillor?
The Scroungers, Claire Balding and Elton John are perverts.
Yeah, he came out with some absolute repellent and hideous comments, and he was suspended and expelled within 3 days of expelled from the party, because we actually take notice of these things. We're not saying, we know that some of our procedures have been flawed. We're the first ones to admit that, hold our hands up, and when these people speak out, we throw them out.
But what about your own leader who goes on radio and says he doesn't want to live next to Romanians?
He didn't say that, Peter.
He did say that.
He
did say
You're
that.
twisting it and spinning it as a media man.
Okay, I'm going to go...
You are. He didn't say that.
And it creates an atmosphere
he did not say that at all.
Of subliminal racism.
He did not say that at all.
Exactly what he said.
All right. You say.
I voted UKIP for the first time. Why? Because what Louise was saying, actually. Because I think for the last few years, all we've heard is talk, talk, talk. And UKIP at last are talking on behalf of the British people, or they're certainly talking to me. And as long as the major parties keep on making these noises that they are listening to us, I'm going to, well, as I say, until they actually deliver, I want to vote UKIP, because at least they give us a voice. And you know, how can I put this? It's, it just feels as though I'm being talked to like a naughty schoolboy, that my vote is a protest vote, and next year I'll be a good boy and come back into the fold and vote Conservative.
They don't understand that. By saying it's a protest vote,
said it's a free hit. What did he mean when he said, it's a free hit?
You know,
what did that mean?
There was a poll today conducted by ITV of people who voted UKIP at this election, and 72% of those people said they would continue to vote UKIP in 2015. Now, we know, honestly, I would not insult your intelligence. We know we've got a long way to go. We know we're flawed. As a political party, we're a baby. We've only been in existence for 21 years. And yes, our procedures and things, you know, people get through the net. But we are working really, really hard. And when those kind of things, sir, come up that you mentioned before, we kick them out, because I also think those things are repellent and odious. So please, think of where we've been, where we are now, and I tell you what, when our domestic manifesto is launched in September, then you can all scrutinise it and ask questions and make your own minds up in 2015.
You sit on the left here.
as somebody who values diversity, who supports gay marriage, who refuses to vilify people based on their nationality, their ethnicity, their religion or their race, UKIP do not and will never speak for me.
The lady over here on the right. Yes.
Yes, I thoroughly endorse what I've just heard, but what I want to say, and what I feel might answer this question about a landslide and what a party could do next year to prevent UKIP gaining any more momentum, is for Ed Miliband and the Labour Party to take a moral stand. Don't appease UKIP. Don't say that UKIP is not racist. UKIP does have, I would say,
you think 5.5 million people are
racism,
racist in this country?
And I would like to see this country.
You're saying
admitted to being.
You think Labour hasn't taken on UKIP properly?
I think Labour hasn't. I think Ed Miliband should speak out against it. We are a country who can take a moral stand. We are enriched by immigration.
Absolutely.
All of us here are enriched by immigration, and I would like to see that stressed and emphasised.
I want to hear from... Hold a second. Are there anybody else here who is a UKIP supporter or voted UKIP who I'd like to hear from? Yes, at the back there. A whole row there. Did you all come together? No. You say in the middle. Yes.
The question, I think, is that the European election that we've just had is on proportional representation. And we had effectively virtually 30% of the voting public voted for UKIP for particular reasons in a European election. We now have an ordinary by-election coming up in Newark, which is my hometown, and it will be very interesting to see whether that momentum can carry on into a conventional election on a first-past-the-post system. And I think that's the real growing up of UKIP to extend its support, not only to cover other issues, but to enable its MPs to candidates to become successful when at the moment the UKIP support is pretty well evenly spread throughout the country and including Wales and including Scotland, but it's not peaking in any particular place.
So Newark next week will be very interesting to see
whether Newark is one of those hotspots.
The young aren't voting though. The young are disillusioned. All the new voters that came through under the Lib Dems lies about what they were going to do for them and feel let down by it have decided not to vote because they can't be bothered. They haven't voted for UKIP. Everyone who votes for UKIP or the demographic of UKIP are the older voter. You know, so obviously the fact that the 34% only turned out to the poll says there's a lot of young disillusioned voters like myself who could never imagine voting for UKIP. And the only reason that you would vote for UKIP, in my opinion, is that you were really disillusioned with the mainstream parties.
Let me go back. Two or three of you had your hands up as UKIP supporters. I'd like to hear from one other of you. Yes. The gentleman with his hand up there, yes.
Well, I'm a Labour supporter, but I voted for UKIP the last election. And I think the question is why did 5 million people voted for UKIP?
And why did you, as a Labour supporter?
Because, I mean, you know, this is real life. I mean, what UKIP are talking about, it's happening on the street. It's not about racism, it's about the economy accepting immigrants more than what they can afford. So when people go to look for a job and they can't find it, people get angry. It's real. When people get frustrated because they can't get that housing or their kids can't get to the next school, it's real life. So when the answers like from David saying that, okay, it's a protest, we know, we're going to go and sort it out. But you're forgetting that you are the ones who actually put us in that situation in the first place, you know? So vote for UKIP, it's a real vote. And if you don't do something about it, I'm expecting to vote for UKIP again.
Right, well, when you say we've got to do something about it, I would say that the coalition, in the 4 years that we've been in government, have been sorting out a mess, and I think we have been doing things about a lot of people's worries. If you want an effective voice in Europe, so it stops keep on taking more and more powers over us, that is what David Cameron has been delivering. And I think at the next election...
People don't believe that, do they? The whole reason, I think, why UKIP is attracting support in quite significant numbers is precisely because they don't think David Cameron has been batting for this country in Europe. And I think that's a perfectly valid charge to make.
We come to that in a moment.
But in which case, don't make it Europe. Take it the decisions we took on the economy. We took some very tough decisions on the economy in 2010, 11, 12, and now the economy is great. And we have similarly taken, we have reduced the total amount of migration. We have tightened the regime for migrants coming from outside Europe. We have tightened the rules on that. You mentioned housing, sir. We have tightened the rules on housing so that people who have been living in there for a time do have priority over people who have just arrived. We've absolutely understand these are the type of legitimate anxieties people have when we're tackling them.
Did you want to come back on that, or do you agree with what David said?
Because the Tories' policy on immigration doesn't work. Because, because they cannot affect what's happening on a Euro immigration. What they're doing is they're just attacking students and people outside the EU.
You can
and it's only a tiny small number of those people.
It's absolutely right.
Sorry, I've been terribly polite, but I realise in this panel you're just going to have to talk over people. It's the only way I'm going to get to speak. But I think the lady over here made a very important point, a direct point about Labour, and I really want to take the opportunity to address this because I think it's a current in the debate. What Ed Miliband and Labour are saying is very clear. You have to make a distinction between UKIP as a party and the things they say and do, and you can't avoid responsibility in the way that you're trying to do tonight to dodge the bullets that you, in terms of some of the arguments. I think you're being, irresponsible in not actually facing up to some of the arguments about some of the things that UKIP have said and do stand for and what they try and present as politics. There's a distinction between that and why people voted for them. I don't absolutely write off those 5 million people that voted for UKIP. I will make and Labour will be out to win your votes back, those of you that are remotely sympathetic to our view of the world, because we would make a big distinction. For example, if there's a problem about housing, and we know housing and access to housing has caused tensions and difficulties in communities, we would say, don't blame the people that are applying for those houses. We need to tackle the supply of housing. I'm the daughter of an immigrant myself. I believe that immigrants have made an enormous and important contribution to this country, and we have to say that loudly and clearly. I respect anybody that comes here with enterprise and creativity and puts in hard graft. I do think they need to respond to that. But we do need to have a managed and a fair and effective system of immigration. And we need to have an honest debate about that. But I think you can do that in a progressive way and a Labour way, and not the way that the Tories have done it. And I think we need to answer people's deep concerns about politics, but also I think on their issues, we can provide answers to them that is not stigmatising people and is not getting into the dogmas of politics.
Having a managed immigration policy is not stigmatising people.
Yes.
I'm young and I did vote UKIP. I'm actually really passionately interested in politics.
You did vote UKIP?
Yeah. The reason I voted for UKIP wasn't because of immigration, it was because I passionately believe that the UK should be a sovereign nation which shouldn't have to be part of the European United States project. We're not actually, I don't feel personally European. And if you look at everyone in the European Commission, they talk of a European dream and a European state and European armed forces. I don't want to be part of that. But I just want to say to Joe Barton, he says young people don't vote. I actually think the reason people don't vote isn't because they're disillusioned, it's because they haven't been educated in politics. I'm one of only a very few number of people in my school who do politics. But
if a lot of those people did vote at the last general election, though, a lot of those people did vote because of what Lib Dems were promising.
The reason they don't vote is because they haven't been informed about politics at all.
Just answer this question, because I think we must move on to another topic. Do you think that there'll be an earthquake in the general election?
No, I don't. Because under the first past the post system, you've got absolutely no hope. UKIP
will you vote UKIP again in 11 months' time?
No, I'm going to vote to try to get Vince Cable out of Twickenham, so...
OK. Well, that's been carefully analysed, and I can't remember what they decided about that. Let's go on to another question. Just before